Welcome to Dark Disney. Tonight, we uncover the shadowy corners of the Magic Kingdom. This is Dark Disney.
Illuminati says the jar in yuppie ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Illuminati says the jar in yuppie ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult, Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult, Disney, Chernobyl to Jafar. Occult, Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult, Disney, Chernobyl to Jafar. Occult, Disney, Tiny Glen, Pinocchio. Occult, Disney, as above, so below. Pinocchio seeks fun on Pleasure Island, where traffickers need kids for the mines. Captain Hook, a lost boy in Neverland, saving kids from Peter Pan's designs. Nemo fails to survive a barracuda. In Latin, nobody means no one. Snow White never took another breath. Her prince, the angel of death, has come. Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more. Occult Disney, Piney Glen, Pinocchio. Occult Disney, as above, so below. Occult Disney. Please enjoy the show. Occult Disney. Occult Disney.
Welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where this month we are talking about the darkest of Disney films. There's Matt here. That's the most I'm going to do with that. Hi, Thomas.
That was an unexpected treat. I like that.
Okay. It's Halloween season. You've been listening to the Monster Mash, the only Halloween song, I guess. Yeah.
And I guess to preface this too with the whole Dark Disney, is this one supposed to be the scariest Disney movie?
I think this or the next one we're doing. One of the two. This one has jump scares, so that's new for Disney, I think.
I would argue jump scare, maybe singular, unless there was. Well, we'll go through it. We'll do a whole breakdown. That's what we're here to do.
Actually, yesterday I was on a chat with my Twilight Zone crowd, and we were talking about Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the Shatner and the Gremlin episode, and we were like, "Is that the first jump scare on television when he opens the curtain and the Gremlin's there?" And I thought that sounds stupid. 1963, they must have had something. So I started looking it up, and in film, the first jump scare is 1942's Cat People. Before that, they simply did not have a jump scare. And there weren't many for years. I guess Psycho has one, right? There's a few here and there. On television, as far as I could tell, that Twilight Zone was the first. The next sighting I got was a Tales from the Dark Side in the 80s, a few Twin Peaks jump scares. And I was like, oh, I guess jump scares they're like more prevalent now, I think. Just if you make a horror movie, it has to have 5 jump scares, right?
I can't believe out of all the movies you just brought up Cat People too, because I've got this huge tangent. I'll give you a preview of the tangent instead of going on the full tangent. But that Cat People is, I believe, written in a way that it was a prequel to another movie called The Seventh Victim. And The Seventh Victim, and by proxy in some way, Cat People, were based on a very real satanic cult of elites that lived in Manhattan, and that this writer, who happened to be the research assistant to Aldous Huxley, he gets set up to go into this actual satanic coven to see what the heck does a satanic coven do, especially high society, Manhattan peoples. And he goes in there, and some of them are knitting, and other are basically casting white magic spells against Hitler, because this was the lead up or during the very early days of World War II. So they had Satanists in Manhattan, and I guess the term Satanist is a little bit general in this case.
It changed after the 60s, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other tangent that I'm working on. But so anyways, Cat People was the freaking entry of the rabbit hole to get to that whole entire tangent. So I highly recommend, if that sounds interesting at all to anyone, look up not just the movies themselves, but Cat People and then The Seventh Victim. If you watch The Seventh Victim, it depicts about as close as Hollywood will permit to what an actual satanic coven of elites would have looked like in the mid 30s to 40s.
Radio, and expect old-timey jump scare if you do watch the movie. Did I even say today's movie? It's The Watcher in the Woods, which was for me kind of the inspiration for going dark Disney. Just I saw it referenced on a different on the TED TV show, and I didn't really know about these movies. I'd heard the titles. I know I'd seen the posters, probably seen the box art in a VHS rental store back in the day. But yeah, this and Something Wicked This Way Comes, the one that we're doing next. Neither of them ever. I guess they never fully became a movie to me till recently. You know.
Something Wicked This Way Comes, I know I've seen, but it was probably way too early for me to remember any of it or to have even kind of processed a lot of it. This one I might have heard of, but I've never actually seen it. And also, just quick rant, and this won't be a tangent, just regular rant, but why do so many Disney movies take place in the UK? Isn't Disney a freaking American company? What the hell is going on with this?
There was something about production, like how everything was filmed in Atlanta because of tax breaks. I think there was one way the Disney company could keep money in the UK if they made productions there. There was some economic, thing that it's, accountants know about. So that actually there is a clear reason why there are so many UKs. This started in the 50s, right? They did like things like Darby O'Gill and the Little People. So it's like, well, we'll save some money if we have at least one production rolling in the UK at any given time.
Okay, just good business. I get it.
Yes. I mean, for this movie, I agree with that. I recently did the two Wicker Man movies, the really great one and the really terrible one. And one of the biggest mistakes the 2005 one made, or whatever it was moving the setting from a weird Scottish Highland island to like Oregon or Washington or whatever it was, because that story, there's so much baked in of like super old, traditions and paganism and stuff, which doing a thing in England, like if you want to do Gothic horror, it makes a whole lot more sense in the English countryside than it would in Nebraska,
Fair point. I mean, yeah, it would be a different movie, but I already want to see like a weird Mormon version of this, where they're doing it in like upstate New York and they're tracing it through like the Micmac caves that Joseph Smith was going into. But it's a good note too, because Watcher in the Woods, as I was watching this, and not in the woods, I immediately was thinking, oh, they're just playing off that Wicker Man, Green Man thing, that if you just have a shaky handheld shot and some heavy breathing, maybe running around in the woods, watching someone from behind tree trunks, it kind of has that feel of, okay, what is this, like a druid that's going to capture them? Is this like some weird forest monster? Am I a tree? What the hell is this? And
see, I was thinking Evil Dead, which comes after this, right? So actually, this would predate the running in the woods sort of shots. But of course, they have the steady cam in Evil Dead, so it adds that weird ominous, the camera is not shaking thing.
Fair, I guess. In a film critic's sort of point here, sometimes the context of when this was made and before, and like you mentioned, the jump scare. Maybe this was one of the earlier jump scares out of all the ones that we've got in horror. So maybe a lot of this was kind of cutting edge a little bit, but it just seems like the setting, and they put it in like a castle looking sort of setting as well. It's not just some random house in the middle of nowhere with a thatch roof, right? It's like a very elaborate sort of like a castle structure, unless my standards for buildings are just very low being in the States.
No, the guy that did the aristocratic guy that was part of the ceremony,
John Keller.
Yes, John Keller. That house was the same house used for The Haunting back in the 60s. So, they were probably like, oh, that house just is like a signifier for Gothic horror. That's not the one the family's in. That's what Keller's in. But I'm sure, that's where you cross your things. Let's take the big creepy haunting house and put it in our movie.
So I guess in an interesting way, this is Disney using the same formula that we've observed in all the animations, where they'll take the folklore, they'll take they'll take some of the settings and stuff, and without even having to be fully acquainted with what they are, they'll just like, well, if we just include this stuff, it'll just kind of like carry over. example, right? Jungle Book, where they're like, don't read the Jungle Book. Don't even care about the Jungle Book. We're just going to use the characters. We're going to use the name and the setting, and we'll just leverage what like this weaponized nostalgia aspect. So I think in the same way, Disney just like book the place where they already had like a creepy feel to it. We'll set it in a place where you can just assume that there's some sort of pagan or, you know, druids kind of camping in the background. They're going to murder you anytime. And then just write the movie on top of that and just let the rest of the things that we've kind of leveraged do most of the real work.
They did have a book to throw out the window as well, or throw into the woods. 1976, Florence Engel Randall wrote the novel A Watcher in the Woods, not The. And one of the Disney producers took it to Ron Miller, who I guess was in charge at the time or close to it. And it was like, hey, we can make Disney's Exorcist, which is kind of a weird pitch, but it took because this movie got made. The first version, there was some wrangling where I think Disney at one point wanted it darker and the director didn't. It premiered in April 1980, and people hated it. It had the ending that I made you watch right before we recorded. There's the original ending to this. They had a lot of trouble with how to end it. They threw out the book ending. The visuals super effects guy said there's like 152 possible endings for this movie. So the original release did have the big crazy insect monster from space, which I love. It doesn't make any sense in the film. I think I really like it as an alternate ending. Like I can watch this insane ending and it's part of the movie now, but it doesn't have to be part of the story of the movie, you know?
I mean, in a weird way, man, I think it made sense to me immediately. So I watched the whole movie, and right before we started recording, you were like, oh, by the way, have you seen this alternate ending? And I was like, no. And the biggest comparison is that the ending you would see now, if you went and just got a recent version of it that doesn't include the alternate ending, the movie literally just ends. Like there is no ending. It just stops. You know what I mean? Like it's resolved within 5 seconds and then the credits roll. It's like, oh my God, she's back. Done. Spoiler alert. She comes back. Oh my God, she's back. And then the credits roll. And I was just like, oh man, this didn't really feel like there was any real conclusion to it. The alternate ending solved all those problems. It also answered a few like unresolved. One of those was, what is this entity? And we'll have to talk about the whole backstory on this. But what is this entity? Because they mentioned that it's, I'm thinking, is it a demon? Is it like a sort of green man spirit of the woods? No, it's a freaking insectoid, terminoid, cybernetic mothman creature that shoots lasers and swallows people and tears open a rift between time space, right? And can throw you into it or suck you back out of it, which is way more interesting than anything else that happened in the movie up to that point. It almost seemed like I wish the movie would have started on this scene in the first 10 to 15 minutes.
There was also a scene. There was also a scene cut from the beginning that was considered to be too scary, by the way.
By who though? Because you said Disney wanted it darker. The director didn't.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. Like how I think I'm saying his name. How he didn't direct the ending you saw. By the way, he was not brought back to make the ending.
He probably hated that watching it. Like what the?
I'm sure he hated it. If you go get this on home media, I believe it will have the. Yes, it does have the other thing. This actually was even going to go farther into weirdness, but they ran out of money. Let's see. At this point, so the alien picks Jan up and disappears. At this point, the two are supposed to fly across an alien landscape to the Watcher's crippled spacecraft. Inside, Karen was trapped in a pyramidal prism. According to Sam Nicholson, the visual effects supervisor, for some reason, the girl who disappeared imbalanced this alien's craft when she went through the portal, which in turn caused this alien crash. Okay, they explain that. Jan reaches out to Karen. They are teleported back to the chapel. But we were going to get like some bizarro space trip kind of added in, that would have been fun. But I guess you don't need that. But yeah, it's like, don't take the monster out of the film. So if you do watch this on home media, though, you can watch the work they did for that even crazier ending, and you can watch the ending that I just showed you. So, if you get this on home media, you're gonna get them all.
I feel like now we need to go back and provide all the context for this and why we're talking about cybernetic insectoid aliens and interdimensional rifts and all of this.
Yeah, going from Gothic horror to that. Well, that's Lovecraftian, isn't it? There's a little bit of America for you, right? Thrown in.
And the kids have American accents, right? So it almost seems like half the family is American and the other, and like the dad is.
I think
English.
the dad is British, right? And then the rest of the family, they've been living in New York City. I think there was an opening in Manhattan before.
Right.
Maybe something scary happened there.
Oh,
I didn't
there's
see
that cat people Satanist connection, man. Like they actually are a bunch of Satanists, which is why. Okay, so let's start over. The movie starts where this family is on their way to some cottage in the middle of kind of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, where apparently they've shot horror movies, unbeknownst to this family. They show up, and immediately the two daughters start having extrasensory perception. One of them can channel other spirits. The other one is seeing dead people in mirrors and can't see their own reflection, which isn't necessarily explained in any great detail. And also seeing weird lights out in the woods. And both of them also are hallucinating, saying things that they don't remember, singing songs that they don't recall mere seconds after they've done it. Just overall acting strange and developing these new senses that I kind of get the impression didn't exist before New York. So the fact that these Americans come to the UK in the middle of this weird wooded area, they start developing all these new senses. And then they find out that there were a group of 4 kids. I don't know how long ago it was. It was like 30 or 40 years prior to this.
40. I got a production tidbit for you on that later.
Okay, so 40 years prior, they're doing a secret society initiation ritual of ceremonial magic. I'm not stretching. This is all like things that they actually say and claim in the movie. They're doing this initiation ritual. It goes wrong. They violate one of the main fundamental rules of ceremonial magic that we'll get into. And because of that, goes haywire. One of the girls in this secret society initiation ritual, like the actual one being initiated, gets sucked into another dimension, or maybe she dies. Who knows? A huge bolt of lightning hits the Godfrey that they're all standing in. A huge bell falls down where she was standing. Everyone else runs out of there. No one sees her ever again. So some of them assume that she ran away. Some assume that maybe she got murdered. Some of them think that she got killed by the bell collapsing, and who knows what happened to the body. But no one sees her for 40 years, this girl, Karen. So towards the end of this movie, we realize that she's been sucked into another dimension, and that this is what they've been kind of communicating with. And they kind of explain that it's not a ghost, it's not a demon, it's not some other ethereal entity. It is literally just a different dimension, like a sci-fi dimension that she sort of swapped places, like a Freaky Friday style, I guess, with another entity that couldn't necessarily fill a human body. So it kind of existed as a voice and could telepathically communicate and make you say or do things, but it couldn't materialize except in the alternate ending. And that's where one of the answers, I was like, well, what do these things look like? The alternate ending is like, oh, it's a terrifying Terminator Mothman creature, which is really cool. I wish there was more of that, but that's sort of the whole breakdown of the movie. Secret society initiation ritual goes wrong during a solar eclipse. I guess that's the most important part. During a solar eclipse, they use sympathetic ceremonial magic. They break the circle as they're doing this, and that causes this rift. So I don't know. Maybe they were summoning demons.
Yeah. I think in 1980, they just were like, oh, the insectoid alien isn't good enough. Like people laughed at it or something because it looks stupid. From 2024, you're like, that looks awesome. They made that in 1980. Yay. You know, so maybe the passage of time helps an effect like that sometimes. Because, yeah, it looks awesome now.
Well, this is pre-Terminator, is it not?
It's 4 years for Terminator, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it's impressive, and you wouldn't see it unless you saw the alternate ending of it reminds me in a way, for that one reason alone, of like Prometheus, where if you miss that one alternate beginning in the case of Prometheus, the entire movie changes and loses so much of the original meaning. And that's kind of the same thing here, where this alternate ending explains way more. And by the way, they don't really get into this as much, but it's just as interesting, is that this girl, Karen, that gets sucked into the other dimension 40 years ago, they explain that she's just frozen in time there. She's just kind of like, I guess, Superman inside of the weird, like crystal prison. and then after they summon her back into the physical realm here on Earth, she's the exact same age as she was when she went in. So it almost like there could have been sequels on here where they start leveraging this for practical uses, but the weirdest thing
essentially disturbing. Fly the Navigator 6-7 years after us does the same thing basically, where the kid shows up, he hasn't aged, and everyone else is 17 years older.
And that's creepy in its own right, you know, because now it's like, oh my god, my mom's about to die. Like my mom's an old lady now. All my friends are old. How do I manage this? You know, she's lost the last 40 years of social progress and all the nuanced, you know, changes that go with that. But
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The reason it's 40 years, by the way, this is kind of a fun production anecdote in there. Betty Davis was 72 when they made this, so they wanted to used a different actress for the young version of her. She wanted to try and do it, so they did makeup tests to try and de-age her, you know, just with straight up makeup. And
we do not have the technology.
No, well, apparently they got her looking about 55, right? They took like 20 years off of her, basically, is what everyone decided. But upon viewing the tests, Howell cued for the crew to leave the screening room and said, "Betty, I don't think you've made it." After taking one long drag from her cigarette, Davis replied, "You're goddamn right." So, you know, they tried, but everyone accepted it wasn't going to work, which is probably for the best.
They could have just substituted in another one of the flying cybernetic mothman monsters.
Oh, to be the young mom? Yeah.
And what I was going to mention too is that there's a weird part of this movie that the whole entire movie to me seemed like it was building up to be a supernatural, pagan kind of folklore style mystery. And then it just takes a hard right. And it's like, nope, this is sci-fi. And it sounds like what you were describing. Not only was it sci-fi, but they had all these rules on how interdimensional time travel worked and like the practical formulas and all the different logic of like, okay, and here's how this interdimensional sort of storyline would have played out. But it only really becomes relevant in the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes of the entire movie. I don't know why they didn't just lean more into the regular old supernatural folklore.
Yeah, I guess they were just like, let's be classy and do some atmospherics. Again, the idea was, let's make Disney's The Exorcist. Again, sounds weird when you say that out loud. But, you know, The Exorcist is kind of paced, like where the money shots are, you know, like blasts of energy, right?
Someone was just like, we're basically going to do Poltergeist. Just cut that one part with the crucifix out. That's the only part.
Poltergeist is same year or a little bit after this, I think. So, yeah. Also, Poltergeist had a PG. These movies had PG ratings, which sounds insane now. You know, Poltergeist was PG. I mean, this isn't completely out. This is a scary PG. It would be a PG-13 now, right?
Well, this one felt not scary whatsoever. It builds on the idea that it's about to be scary or something scary is gonna happen. Nothing scary actually happens. And consider this. This is actually, I think, a little bit interesting. Maybe in in a crappy way, but there's no villain in this whole movie. There's no bad guy. No one has nefarious purposes. You might stretch it that John Kelly and maybe the original 3 kids, they were kind of suppressing what actually happened. They didn't come clean that it was this ceremonial magic ritual that they likened to a seance a little bit. No one really mentions that, but like there's really no bad guy. Right? There's no monster in the woods. Like the Watcher in the woods is ultimately either a neutral or even a benevolent being.
Yeah. I mean, they make it seem like Betty Davis is going to be some evil force, but she's not at all. She's just an old lady in the end. You know, it's just shoot her creepy, you know, a few times and let her roll.
Maybe a crappy landlord. That was the scariest thing to me. As I was sitting back and thinking about everything that happened. I was like, it would just terrify me to actually have her as a landlord. I feel like that's probably the scary premise from a rational point of view.
I did one of my accidental synchronistic viewing things again, which might have made my impression of this movie scarier. We had to delay this recording for several days because of a hurricane rocking through Florida. So I watched the first 30 minutes and then just put off the rest of the movie until a few days later. In between, I happened to watch Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, about which is kind of like a similar concept of a girl being lost, except it's way more disturbing and scary, right? And then I finished this movie, so I might have been like, it's not the same plot, but there's some elements that are similar. The whole Twin Peaks ceremonial magic, black lodges, that sort of stuff. So that seeped in. The other thing is when I came back and finished the movie, I had forgotten who the father was, and I spent like most of the movie thinking that was what's her name, Jan's boyfriend, and then I was like, "Ooh, no, I'm wrong on that. Oops." So yeah, I
Mike,
got a little.
And he puts his name on the side of his helmet. It says Mike on it.
Oh, Mike, right. But yeah, I just started mixing him and Dad up a little bit because Dad looks way too young. Like Dan McKellum's kind of a weird casting choice for the dad here. He looks like he's 18, so it's confusing.
And what you were describing there too, I can't remember if it's called layering or embedding or something, but in NLP, the technique of starting a story and then stopping and then telling a completely different story and then going back and finishing the original story, that's supposed to take whatever that inner story was. In your case, it was Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And that kind of embeds itself deeper into your subconscious mind, whereas the outer story is the one that, is kind of more readily available in your conscious mind, to where once you forget it, you can kind of like put things back where they are. But then that Fire Walk with Me is like deep down. It's going to slowly come out in dreams and interpretations of everything else that you do.
Well, that's what you do with a David Lynch film, isn't it? So
yeah, you start. Maybe that's a whole new thing, right? You start a Disney movie and then you stop it at a certain point. You watch a David Lynch something, and then you finish the Disney movie, and it's almost like aerating a fine wine.
It's not Disney, but yeah, do the first 30 minutes of Wizard of Oz, then Wild at Heart, and then finish Wizard of Oz.
Maybe VeggieTales.
No, there's VeggieTales, Lost Highway. Bit of VeggieTales, Lost Highway. Hey, you know what? I think I stumbled on it. Yeah, my personal phrase for that, as I said at the start, was synchronistic viewing, which I like. I want to coin that phrase. So I see what you're saying with the NLP thing too. I brainwashed myself again.
I mean, we all do it constantly. It's just interesting to know. And it's not like NLP invented that. It's just an observation, and someone said, "Oh, here's a common pattern. Let's give it a name so that we can more easily talk about it." So, and unfortunately, I don't know the exact name for whatever that technique is.
Yeah, I do several media-based podcasts. I'm always watching something. Occasionally, the things I'm watching for different podcasts, that will happen. Or, just the way I watch things, it might be 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, and skipping around a little bit, very scatterbrained viewing. But that makes these weird connections that, makes for interesting conversation. Like, I'm thinking of Jan, and I'm thinking of Laura Palmer too, which they look kind of similar.
And I couldn't not think about Brady Bunch, especially there's one part when someone's like, "Oh, Jan," and I was like, "Oh my God, this is all falling into place." She even looks like her.
Yes. No, that came to mind a bit. Ellie doesn't fit that paradigm, but whatever.
Well, and the other thing too that I guess to get out my walking stick a little bit and wax poetic about older times, but what you were kind of saying there, and like this whole like we program ourselves and the subliminal embedding and everything, that was another magical part of, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s, is that you kind of watched TV shows one episode at a time, and you might be watching like 5 or 6 different ones. So in my mind, at any given time, there was, I don't know, X-Files and Price is Right and Rugrats and like all these different unresolved things and plot points that are constantly embedding themselves in my subconscious that I bring out with me into the rest of the world and all my other interactions. And that it's kind of missing in the same way, where we don't all share this weird like amalgamation of different programmings that we've kind of got like unresolved in our minds. Now you can just sit down and binge a whole show and kind of tie a nice bow at the end of it and move on. And sometimes I can binge watch a whole show and not even remember anything that happened like a few years later.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if this, our dark Disney period for live action dark Disney is 79 to 85, and kind of based on what you just said, I'm thinking in 79 and 80 when they made the black hole in this one. It was like it's going to show in the theater, it's going to creep people on the theater, and then it's probably going to go away. Whereas a few years later, Something Wicked This Way comes and Return to Oz. By then, it's clear like, oh, this is going to end up on video and have like more coattails. It's kind of an interesting, I guess, pivot point just in like home media where you can start poring over and obsessing over these movies. So The Watcher in the Woods would have been a pretty early VHS release, and you'd have people kind of poring over it a little bit more because they don't want to see a newer movie, right? When you go to the video store. So.
Yeah, and I guess you might start thinking about how to make things more evergreen and timeless as opposed to just jumping on different trends. And so speaking of, how was this one received? Because I wonder how many people did this embed itself into their subconscious.
Well, that's the weird thing that first version with the other ending got like scathing professional reviews, like that people hated it. So it was pulled from release. Like they were going to release it in that first version, and the press reviews were so bad, they were like, let's go back to the drawing board. And then
I want to explain really quick too the difference between the versions. So the alternate ending version is at the end. Both versions, Jan and Ellie convince everyone, and they get the old gang back together, right? They get the original three people, who is John Kelly and Mike's mom, who is Louise or Mary something or other. And then there's an old hermit dude that lives in the woods called Tom Colley. And she gets these three people back together, goes to the exact same spot 40 years later during the same exact solar eclipse, basically. And they all do the whole seance thing. That's where they both share, similarities, the two endings. This is where they differ, is that in the alternate ending, once they do all of this, that horrific insectoid cybernetic Terminator creature shows up. It blasts freaking Tom like straight across the room, right? And then it just kind of scares everyone for a little bit, turns into like a little kind of sci-fi horror show, and then it opens this big portal in the room, like the CGI portal, and then it sucks Jan into the portal and it disappears, and everyone's like, oh my god, what have we done? This is exactly what happened 40 years ago. We've just
it was her idea.
Yeah, like all right, well, when we told you this was going to happen, and it happened. And then about 5 seconds later, the little portal opens up again, and it's Jan pulling Karen, the girl that got sucked up 40 years prior, pulls her back through this portal. And she's like, it's Jan, everyone. She was frozen. Like, she does all the exposition. It's Jan. She was frozen in time. That's why she's the same age. She's back. Look, that was a different entity. They had swapped places. Okay, all good now. And then it cuts to another scene where they're just kind of like doing niceties, and then the credits roll. Versus, I guess, the new ending that replaced that one is that after they all do that little seance for the second time, Karen just kind of shows up, and someone in the background's like, Karen's back, and then the credits roll. It just cuts and the credits roll. Like they just removed it entirely and had someone overdub, hey, Karen's back. And someone was like, cut it, we're good.
I guess that's right. NLP'd myself again a little bit because I already knew that there was an alternate ending. So immediately after finishing the film, I put on the alternate ending. So maybe that actually did become the actual ending in my mind, which, hey, good for this movie. To answer your question, the insectoid version premiered April 17th, 1980 in New York City to scathing reviews. So they went back to the drawing board for a year and a half. The re-release is October 9th. 1981, which I guess they were, aiming for Halloween, right? It flopped. 9 million budget, box office was 5 million. That's kind of where I was bringing up the whole VHS thing, because once 80s kids started watching it, it did become a cult favorite. It currently has kind of mid reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's right in that 50-50 area. So it's got a weird cult thing. It is such a fascinating artifact of 1980 Disney, I guess, is one of the reasons why we're looking at it. But
God, I am just imagining and wishing that there was simply a Disney animated version of The Exorcist.
That would be cool. Oh, I might have even mentioned it here a few weeks ago. My friend, I haven't seen Alien Romulus yet, but one of my friends was going off to see it, and Fox is owned by Disney now, and I was like, wow, I really hope they have like the castle logo before Alien Romulus. Dun, 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 then we go into an Alien movie. This had the Buena Vista thing though, right? Which makes it feel like you're about to start a 40s animation.
Hear me out on this, and maybe we can just kind of hash this out a little bit as if we are corporate Disney. But if you're Disney and you know that some of the IPs that you've developed or worked with over the years are coming up, and that other people are now going to be repurposing them, Blood and Honey, and there's another one too now about like the Steamboat Willie.
Steamboat Willie Mickey is now available to anyone,
right? So if you know that this is going to happen anyways, why not set up a side little Touchstone Plus, Touchstone Max, right? Touchstone XXX, and do it yourselves, because I would much rather see Disney's version of Blood and Honey than whatever we got just as like a novelty, right? Like if they actually leaned all the way into it. And I understand that they might not want to be seen as like, oh my God, they animated The Exorcist, I'm not taking my kid to see the next Disney movie. Because they're evil now, or they don't represent good moral values. But it seems like they would be in the power to do that, and if anything, it might reinvigorate that Disney thing. I don't know. Maybe that's not part of their long game plan, I assume.
Well, they're one thing they recently have. Deadpool and Wolverine was so successful, they have a walk around Deadpool in the parks now. He does story time with Deadpool, so it's kind of cheeky, but he can't really go full Deadpool, can he? Not in the middle of a park. So how do you walk that line? And what if they make a Deadpool line, a Deadpool ride? Is it 18 plus? All of
his guns, or is it just Deadpool in his outfit, but like no guns or weapons?
I imagine that's a good question. I mean, I've been to the parks recently, but it's Tokyo, and Tokyo don't got IP.
His swords and his guns are kind of what makes his outfit, and he's even got those Rob Liefeld pouches, I think, even in a lot of his modern designs. So
I think they put him in California Adventure too, just because that's the slightly edgier park, right? See if I can find a picture of Deadpool at California Adventure here. He's got his swords. He's got swords. He's got a holster, but I don't see a gun.
Yeah,
I think you're onto something there. Yeah, his swords are very prominent, but so they make him seem like a swordsman in the park, it seems. So, I mean, he can say snarky things, but he can't say something too offensive to the dads, or they'll, complain, or the Karens will complain.
There might be something to it, man. Like Disney could have an interesting pivot where they're like, you know what? We're not just family friendly anymore. Again, let's do that damn animated Exorcist that we promised back in the 80s. And let's do it right this time.
Well, there is in Malaysia, there's a park. It's called it's now called Sky Dome or something. It's on a highland in Malaysia, right? It was supposed to be a Fox park. It actually still has some Fox attractions. They were allowed to keep a little bit of it. But it was a full theme park. Fox and the company building it got pissed off each other. Their lawsuit, and then Disney comes in, and they were like, "Well, we don't want that. It's next to a casino, which I think it's more, same in Orlando, right? They don't want the casinos in Orlando, more because it's competition probably than it's a moral standing. But it sounds like it could be a moral thing. So this park was just in weird flux for a while. It has opened now, but it was going to have an alien ride, which is now something else. It does have a Planet of the Apes ride, so it's kind of weird what stuck and what didn't. But yeah, Disney was not cool, I guess, with like this theme park with alien attractions and all that sort of stuff. I mean, they had their alien encounter for a while, which at the time they could not get the Fox rights. I'm sure they would have liked to put a xenomorph in there.
And that note about the casinos, that's one of the main reasons that Walt wanted to buy up so much land in Central Florida, was because he saw in Disneyland that he couldn't really control what people saw as they drove in and out of the park, and the competition and anything else that was happening, because he only owned this tiny little chunk amongst everyone else. So when he set up Florida, when you go to Disney World now, they can determine what kind of stores you see 10 minutes in and out of the park, because they owned pretty much all of that land. You know what I mean? They keep up with a lot of that. So you kind of get transported to another world where there are no vape shops or like weird kind of like hole in the wall places that look a little bit sketch as soon as you kind of enter that Disney property. And even after you get on Disney property, you're still driving around for 10, 15 minutes to get into the various park that you want to get into. So it kind of takes you into this controlled environment where they decide. Even the fire station, it's kind of created to look like a cartoonesque, with like, oversized fire hydrants and sort of like Dalmatian print and everything. Like, it doesn't feel like you're in a real part of the world at that point.
Yeah, they call it the Disney bubble, right? Of course, now you got to pay out of your nose for that bubble, especially if you're staying on property. I just told you I recently went to Tokyo Disneyland. I was actually looking at prices at the Magic Kingdom and stuff, and I was like, everything here was half the price of what it is in the States right now. The ticket was half, the food was half, everything I paid was like half of what it is in the States. So that's kind of, I mean, I guess that's good that we have a different company that owns it here, but
they can charge anything they want and people just keep going. And honestly, if you're in the state of Florida and you want to go to Disney World, it almost always makes sense to just get a damn annual pass. Because if you just go 2 times in a year, it kind of pays for itself to just get a pass where you can go as many days as you want. And that's part of the scam. And that's part of the reason why it's so damn expensive here as well. So they're just trying to push you to drop like $800 to $1,000 to get that annual pass.
Of course, now you got blackout days, things like that. Terms change.
Well, even when I was working in the parks, we actually had it was so weird. So when I first started working at Disney, I had a green contractor badge. I could just go in any day I wanted. There was no such thing as a blackout day because it was kind of like, here, I'm in. And then I could even go with people. So if I had like 3 or 4 people with me, I could also just show up to any of the gates and be like, they're with me, and they just stamp their hands or whatever and send them into the park. And then at some point in like the 2010s around there, they changed it to all tickets. So then they just gave everyone 5 to 10 tickets that you could give to other people throughout the rest of the park, but you still could get in anytime you wanted with yours. And then it turned into, okay, now if you want to get into the parks and you're not there on like official work business or anything, you yourself have to use these tickets. And those tickets had all the blackout days and then some, like blackouts plus. So basically you could go on like the worst days of the entire year where it was already going to be busy and no real major kind of events going on. So it kind of changed over time. And that's just because there's so many damn people that are willing to save up for years and make that their big Disney vacation. And Disney's established themselves as one of those like once in a lifetime trips that you do for your kids. Like, what are you, a monster? You didn't bring your kids to Disney World? And that's ingrained in so many people that they're like, oh, what? It's just $1,000 for a life-changing experience. Meanwhile, like the ticket should probably be, even with inflation and everything, should probably be like $70 or something. Like value wise, I think you probably get $60 to $70 worth of value out of that. But yeah,
my ticket was
now,
60.
like, yeah, dude. Well, here I think it's bordering on $200 if you're out of state.
Wow, yeah. But and I also had the charm of just suddenly decide, you know what, I think I'm going to go tomorrow. You do have to decide one day because you have to buy them through the app with your credit card. There is no ticket booth in Tokyo right now, so you have to at least premeditate for one day. But that's it.
But see, there's no reason that they would even need to charge less than $100. They can pack out the park most of the time. When the 2019 pandemic hit, I mean, because I was paying attention to all the news and the Reddits and the Twitters and everything just to see what the hell's going on in Orlando, because we have a lot of international traffic and tourism, and when things shut down, it like you feel it immediately, especially when you're outside of the Disney bubble, because so much of it relies on like tourism driving stuff. And as soon as that happened, that was like everyone's major concern. Well, can we still get into Disney? Can we still use our annual passes? And I guess it makes sense, right? You dropped all this money, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything's closed. And I'm sure that Disney didn't just start handing out like, here's your $1,000 back, here's your $1,000 back. So
Florida was open by summer though, weren't they? They opened pretty quickly.
They're heavily reduced. They would actually start tracking it so that only once they got to capacity, they'd track how many people were leaving and then let more people in based on that, which was kind of new. They're supposed to always do that, but I don't think they really necessarily do. To them, they would just more people, the merrier. You just see the wait times dramatically jump up from 20 minutes to like 2 to 3 to 4 hours.
Yowza. Anyway, I guess we should refocus on The Watcher in the Woods because we have occult ceremonies to talk about.
Right. Well, and I've just got a smattering of quotes and questions that came up in this movie, and I guess we'll just go through chronologically, movie wise. So my first big observation is that Jan is in this creepy old house with the creepy old Mrs. Aylwood, and she kind of has her hand on like a window pane, and it just cracks. And right as it cracks, Mrs. Aylwood is like, "Oh, are you okay? Did you cut yourself? Are you bleeding?" And she's like, "Oh no, it's just a cut," right? But that almost feels that if you were going to do some sort of black magic or ceremonial initiation ritual, that drawing of blood and blood magic would always kind of be like one of the initial steps into that. So this kind of serves as, and here's the blood magic. Here's where we get our first drop of blood. And that it's literally the one event that kicks off all the other supernatural events that happen.
Yeah, my note, if you're curious on that section, is I guess this is how you find out if you are a vampire or something. 7 years bad luck. She did touch the mirror a bit. Then
but she couldn't see herself in the mirror, which, like, was she a vampire? Is it unlucky if you break a mirror that doesn't show you your own reflection? I almost feel like there's an inversion there, that you're allowed to break a mirror if it doesn't show you your reflection.
You should break the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. You need to destroy that thing. It's proof.
Well, maybe she did the right thing because it turned out she was not a vampire.
Yeah, she just summoned a interdimensional cybernetic mothman monster.
Right. Well, that's not something a vampire does. That's what someone else does.
you don't know that for a fact.
Okay, she could do both. Yeah.
Miss Aylwood also asks her a pretty sort of like philosophical deep question. She just says, "What sort of person are you?" to Jan, and Jan was kind of like, "Oh, like I don't know, what kind of person are you?" And then she's kind of follows it up, and she's like, "Are you adventurous and kind? Are you sensitive? Do you sense things?" And that's when Jan, this almost feels like it was a hypnotic induction, right? Are you a sensitive person? Do you sense things? Like she's almost telling her, sense things, become a sensitive person, become adventurous. And Jan's just kind of, yeah, I am. I guess I'm all those things that you just said. I think I do sense things. I think I'm feeling something right now.
Yeah, I guess that's a weird thing. You know, when she does look old here, she looks like a scary version of my grandmother, to be honest, because my grandmother also had like kind of that mid-Atlantic accent thing, right, going on. So I was thinking a little bit of like a scary granny, you know, when watching this
Absolutely,
movie.
Yeah. I mean, she clearly was cast to sort of be like a...
She's a red herring, isn't she?
She's the red herring. Perfect. Yeah. She's the red herring old lady that's supposed to be scary. Again, there are no bad people in the entire movie, which is weird for a horror movie. In a horror movie, you usually want at least one villain, one big bad, and not no big bads.
Well, you can have your Lovecraft with your unspeakable horror or terror, which I guess is an alien
which is
here.
Only in the alternate ending, right?
Right. So
there's no Lovecraft in the non-alternate ending.
Hey, here's a weird little factoid I stuck in my notes that the actor playing Ellie is Paris Hilton's aunt.
Okay, now it is a little bit scarier. I actually looked into that the one that plays Jan was a professional ice skater and was in Ice Castles, and then in this, and then in a whole bunch of kind of like straight to TV movies.
Yeah, it looked like she was working about to 1990 and then, pretty much stopped, which, if that's what you want to do, sure, why not?
I always try to do a little deep dive, see if I don't know, someone sold their soul and ended up drowning in blood in India or something. It would be good to have those notes.
Yeah, the way they shot the not the drowning, but the potential drowning where Jan gets saved did make me think of the Ewok Adventure. Did you ever see the Ewok Adventure, the TV movie?
I don't think so.
Okay, this has maybe we can
but
retroactively
they do want to kill
that.
people, right? Ewoks do murder people.
Oh yeah, they're the Viet Cong, right? But there's a scene in there where one, it's like Disney times 8,000 because your family all instantly gets slaughtered once you crash land on this planet. I believe that's the plot to one of them. I haven't seen these movies for decades, but the one scene, here's one that has stuck with me since I was 5 or 6 years old because I did see it on TV when it aired. The boy touches the water and then he's trapped under the water. which I found super terrifying. So this scene, it felt a little bit like that, just the way they shot it, I guess. Recalled the Ewok adventure from a few years later, with a very psychically scarring scene for me. Traumatizing scene. There we go.
Well, that's a good point too. I guess glossed over this and part of the recap that there's one scene in particular where Jan and Ellie are just kind of wandering around in the woods a little bit. I think this is a little bit creepy because Ellie has this dog who she names Nakar, which is basically just Karen spelled backwards, which is kind of stupid, but whatever. And
well, Shining got away with it too.
Who?
The Shining got away with it too.
I guess so. Yeah. But so she names this dog that she finds in the car, which is Karen backwards, and the dog runs out in the middle of the woods. And while they're out in the middle of the woods, Jan sees something. She's like this blue glowing light. And at a certain point, I had to rewind it to make sure that they had actually kind of conveyed this. So she doesn't fall off of a log into this pond. What happens is that she teleports. This blue light somehow caught it, like zaps her, and her body, like if I froze frame it and I like stepped through the frames, and they have CGI where she kind of glow, her whole entire body starts to glow, and then it just fades out to nothing. So now there's just nature behind her. And then it shows another scene of the pond, and then she phases back in, and where she's just barely kind of holding her balance, and then as soon as she fully materializes again, she falls into the pond. And after she falls into the pond, Mrs. Aylwood runs up with a stick, and the scene totally implies that she's trying to drown her, like that she's using this stick to hold her down under the water and kind of force her to die a little bit.
I guess that's where I started thinking of the Ewok adventure a little bit, being trapped under the, this thin glaze of water.
But they cut that scene, and they immediately, it's like, oh, thank you so much for saving her life. I thought you were trying to drown. Like they kind of do what you're thinking. And it's like, but that's not what happened. You had to push her down because she was caught under a branch, and that it looked like you were trying to. So anyways, they kind of explain all that away. And I was wondering too, if that might have been something they got cut or like re-edited, or if it was just like a sloppy, another red herring. Again, they're just piling the red herring.
It's red herring for 10 to 12. It's a red herring for tweens, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Baby's first red herring.
Just to confirm, I know in the past you've used CGI as a overall for effects, but I'm looking and just want to confirm that this is all weird 1980s analog gloopiness in the effects. So for anyone listening.
And I really didn't understand why this needed the time that they spent on the CGI to teleport her from a foot away on this log to another foot away, and then just slightly off balance as she falls in. They could have done a million. Like it would have made more sense if they teleported her just above the freaking pond, so she's in midair and drops into it. Because when you watch it, like again, I had to stop and rewatch it a couple times to be like, did she get zapped with a laser and the laser pushed her off balance? Or was it something else? And it was the something else. There's so many weird decisions made and so much money spent. You said they went back to the drawing board for a year and a half, and the best they came up with was like, let's just cut it. Let's just delete that part.
And with a different director again. It turned out the special effects guy, the same guy that said there's 152 potential endings, is the one that I think ended up directing that final sequence in the end. So he didn't choose the best one, I guess.
Honestly, I mean, that's what if there was another 150 endings and each ending is about 3 minutes long, then you've got well over 6 hours of content if you just were to recreate all 150 endings of this movie.
That'd be fun. I mean, I don't think he actually wrote them all down or anything, but I guess the thing I did, it was very helpful to chase the movie with that scene, because it does feel more conclusive that way.
Well, I gotta ask, is there any ending at all aside from it turning into a completely different movie that would have saved the first hour and 10 minutes?
I guess it's does the first hour and 10 minutes, do you get into the vibe or not? Another one I recently watched for another podcast, Halloween, was The Omen. Kind of does the same thing. Nothing really happens in The Omen, as it's mostly all atmospherics, which I think is what this movie is also trying to do, but it's Disney's first time trying to do that. Just like the black hole, like they doing this big special effects sci-fi movie, but they'd never done one before. So now they're like, we're going to do a horror movie, but we've never done one before.
And this might be like one of the last horror. I mean, aside from the other movie that we're about to watch for the next episode, right? But this, it seems like this is their horror movie. This is the closest they got.
Yeah, because after that, there is Touchstone. So now if Disney's going to make a horror movie, it is Touchstone. And was Dimension? Who owned Dimension Films? I think that might have actually been a Disney thing. Dimension, have a look at that. You had a few more questions in your notes, did you?
Yeah, the mom has a good quote. She says, "Even monsters have to sleep," which just feels like a badass quote. Like that could actually be in a Nightmare from Elm Street or something. Jan sees Miss Aylwood just wandering into the woods by herself at night, which again, what's that? The third red herring. Like, what the hell is she going out into the middle of the woods doing? Looking for her missing daughter. Again, even if they focus more on that, it would have been a little bit creepier, but it's just unresolved.
I guess that, yeah, there's just a bunch of push and pull in this movie, just in the behind the scenes, like how creepy is it? Oh, by the way, I was kind of right and kind of wrong about Dimension Films. You know Dimension Films, right? Like 2000-ish horror films. 2000 era horror films. Founded in 1992, bought by the Weinsteins for Miramax, and Miramax was bought by Disney in 1993. So from 1993 to 2005, technically those horror movies are Disney movies. So the final destinations are Disney's.
And if we're getting technical, another one of the fun technical ones is that Disney at some point temporarily owned Island Records, which in turn owned Insane Clown Posse. And this was during the release of The Great Malenko. So in that same, like, technically right is the best kind of right, Disney owned ICP. Disney sold and made money directly from the Great Malenko album and Insane Clown Posse, which almost feels like the antithesis of everything that Disney would normally be a part of. But you can connect those dots. Like, this isn't conspiracy for once. This is real.
Chapter 2, verses 13 to 17 of the Juggalo Bible.
Right. Again, man, like Disney has, they're leaving money on the table by not just fully embracing some of these things. Like, if Disney was like, you know what, we're going to put together a concept album and have ICP do it all. Nothing's off the table. Anything you want to do, guys.
We're changing Toontown to Juggalo Land.
I mean, that would be pretty awesome. Again, so a couple other ones too. There's a really weird, mild love story. It's about as intense as the horror part of this movie, and that's that Jan and Mike kind of like each other, and that's it. That's about as hot and steamy as it gets. But he does play somewhat of a role in the movie. One is that his mom is one of these three girls that ended up sending Karen to an alternate Mothman cyber dimension. But also, there's a very important scene when they're watching Mike on his dirt bike. They're going around this track, and Ellie yells out to her sister, Jan, and she's like, "Hey, come over here," whatever. And as soon as she does that, one of the guys in this dirt bike race loses control of his dirt bike. It flies over this ramp, and it smashes and explodes like Flight 93 on this huge like boulder that Jan was on, and it just disappears. Like, it explodes and it disappears. And I think they found the passport of that guy unscathed somewhere else near the wreckage. But that was the one scene where you kind of get an idea that Ellie really does have real psychic abilities. She's actually tapping into some other realm. And even when Jan said, "Wow, how did you know?" or something like that, Elle was basically saying, "Oh no, that wasn't me. That was Nakar, right? That was the dog. The dog was calling for
the
you."
The dog told me to do it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So a little Son of Sam sort of reference there, I assume. This is this is after Son of Sam.
Yeah. I eclipses still make me weirdly nervous. I think when I was 4 years old, in the kindergarten, we went outside. So, just this has the solar eclipse, and it was a total eclipse in 83 or 84 or something. And you're like, don't look at the sky, look in this little hole. And when you're 4 years old, like, and I can't look up, I'm going to go blind. So I still have like a weird existential terror about eclipses because of that. Just,
That's funny, just because my link to eclipses is, I think, right around the time, it wasn't Grumpy Old Men, but it was a Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon movie where they go on a cruise. And during this cruise, there's a solar eclipse. And for now, whatever reason, anytime solar eclipses come back up in the news, I just imagine a movie with Walter Matthau in it. So it's the least terrifying reaction ever. I don't have the apocalypto reaction. I've got the Old Men at Sea. I wish I could remember the name of it. It was something about sailing or cruising.
No, I have to look into Out at Sea, by the way. Brent Spiner, Lieutenant Commander Data, plays the fussy waiter, if I remember.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a sucker for Grumpy Old Men movies.
Yeah, but it's a good one for Brent Spiner too, if you're a fan of his. Is I guess what I'm saying.
Also in the movie, Jan directly suggests, she says out loud that Karen might have been murdered as she's kind of like talking about this, and she's learning about this backstory in this weird house that she kind of inherited from the landlord they're living with. And then it kind of turns into a murder mystery for a small amount of time. Another just complete red herrings and wild goose chases. But first they look into Tom Cooley, this weird hermit guy. They call him a hermit, but he doesn't look like a hermit. He just wears a trench coat and he's super creepy about it. That he lives out in the middle of the woods, which he does, and he just kind of stands there and he stares at you, all red herring. Then there's Mary Pierce, that's the name of Mike's mom, and she's the one that like runs off first when she sees Karen. So we see this scene where Ellie zones out into like another dimension, essentially, like her mind is no longer there, and she starts drawing the word Karen backwards on the dust on this window. And that's where, after she draws it out backwards, they're kind of implying that she didn't realize that she drew it. She wrote it out, and then she sees it backwards, but reads it as if it were forwards. And that's where the name of the dog comes from, Narak. But from the other side of the window, Mike's mom, Mary Pierce, she sees the word Karen. And as she's talking to Jan or Jan's mom, she reads the name, and then she's like, oh my God, I have to go. And she just books it out of there. And then John Keller, apparently it was his idea. He was the one that came up with what they call a game originally, but then we find out it was an actual ceremonial magic initiation ritual where they got a seance style where they join hands and they create a circle, and that circle is this sympathetic magic reflection of the solar eclipse, as above, so below. And that also there's this big 10-pointed star they kind of incorporate. The way that the light shines down through the stained glass also creates this 10. I counted it was like a 15-pointed star. But like all these different things kind of come together. But they essentially explain in the movie that it's sympathetic magic, that the circle symbol that they see in the pond and that she sees on the ground is that solar eclipse, and that them joining hands in the seance also forms a circle. So you've got these three different circles. When they all align perfectly at this exact moment, that's when you can possibly open this dimension to another realm.
So do we have Keller as what, a baby Crowley or something? Well, I guess Crowley was doing some different kinds of magic, but it did seem like a weird control mechanism from that guy, who turns out to be kind of a nasty aristocrat 40 years later, right?
Yeah, I was getting Crowley vibes. I was also thinking maybe Edward Kelly and John Dee. Like he was sort of this 1978 John Dee localized version of him. But I
didn't get the Kelly. That's too bad. Maybe the hermit guy is the drifter guy is the Kelly.
Well, he's the scary one, right? The actual guy that just lives out in the woods and stands and stares at you and runs away if you look at him. That was the creepy guy. That's the one that I originally thought, oh, if there's a murderer that killed Karen, this is the guy that did that. But all, red herrings all the way down.
Maybe that's where I enjoyed the movie a little more than you, again, with my Twin Peaks sandwich, because this one doesn't quite commit to that, right? There's no bad guys. And then I go and watch this movie in between with like one of the most horrible murders ever committed to film, you know? So, okay, well, it's satisfied there. Let's go finish Watcher in the Woods. So I didn't care that there was a murder. Right? That's been covered.
And I did have to count when they show the star that's actually worked into the floor. That one is a 10-pointed star. And this one is a decagram. I think that's 10-pointed. And then it technically, I don't think there's a popularized name for stars that have more than 12 points. So a 12-pointed star is a dodecahedron. But anything above that is just like a 13-pointed, a 14-pointed, a 15-pointed. So the only one that they actually show that was designed intentionally is the 10-pointed star, which I think corresponds with the Tree of Life or the Sephiroth, because that has the 10 pathways. So in this 10-pointed star, each ray coming out of the star represents a different path. But the other one that we see is through the sunlight, but it's, the eclipse light coming through this window on the side of the Godfrey that they're standing in. And just because the way that the light hits in, it doesn't make a perfect star. So you've got like overlapping specks to it. But anyways, for just like the deepest occult symbolism that I was able to find in here was that 10-pointed star, which is where they're doing this initiation ritual / seance.
So are they screwing up by mixing their own 15-point stars on top of the 10-point ones?
I don't think they have control over that and how like the thing came. And it is kind of described that where they screwed up was that they formed this circle, lightning hits the Godfrey, and then when that happens, the girl, or I guess all three of them, they break hands and they run away. And that exact moment, them breaking that circle, was the grave sin that they all committed. That's what screwed everything up. If they had just kept holding hands, then theoretically the bell wouldn't have fallen, the rest of the Godfrey wouldn't have fallen down on them, it wouldn't have set the fire. None of that would have happened. But because they broke hands, they broke that sympathetic magic, and everything fell apart from there.
So would they have been smarter? And as a guy who does not go around doing magic, but it's heard a fair amount about, like magic with a K or whatever. If you, I don't know, make a salt circle, is that smarter? Make a magic circle that's not you.
The salt circle just keeps entities either inside or outside. It's like putting up a little wall. So I don't know. I think that still them dropping their hands and breaking the circle themselves was the real problem. It would be like if you're in the middle of a seance and you've actually summoned Grammy, right? And Grammy's telling you where your Bitcoin address is that you lost 8 years ago because you didn't think it was going to ever amount to anything. And right as she's going to tell you, someone like sneezes and they take their hands away. Now Grammy's going to like kill your cat and kill your dog and like maybe slaughter an entire family, right? Because you broke this rule of magic where you're not supposed to break the circle in the middle of the freaking trend. It's like pulling out the plug as you're trying to download something, I guess.
Okay, so they made the worst mistake. Although it did turn out to be weird aliens and not supernatural, going by the original ending of the movie.
Right. Well, and even in the final ending where they kind of just cut it all out, but they still sort of bend over backwards a little bit to explain that this is another entity from another dimension and that they simply made a mistake and they can correct it. I mean, they kind of just leave it that vague. It never shows you that it's like a cybernetic being, but they kind of let you know it's not a demon and it's not some sort of natural magic. Like it is another world entity. It almost felt like Alien.
Right. I am thinking Disney proxy isn't here that much. I guess Karen being gone, but then it's the mom, right? So that doesn't make sense. There's a full nuclear family.
It's the mirror. It's the mirrored version of the Disney proxy, where in that we're not watching the movie where the Disney proxy is taking place, but the Disney proxy is at play, right? Because Karen, they assume that she ran away. If she didn't get murdered, then she ran away. So technically Karen is out on her own somewhere, and probably in this frozen dimension that we're not privy to. We just see her come back into ours. But as she's in this other dimension, she's finding other IP. Like there's another dimension out there in the Disney universe where Karen is a protagonist in a Disney major motion film, and she's got little like animal friends that are guiding her through. And then at the very end, she pops back into our dimension. So if you went, sideways, you turn 90 degrees and went into this dimension where the cybernetic moth monsters are, there's a Disney World with a Karen ride somewhere in there.
See, I was almost sitting here being like, oh, well, since it is a nuclear family that sticks together, they're being troubled by spirits and horror and things, as opposed to, our fun Disney adventure.
Let's see. You mentioned the jump scare. Jump scare is a little bit cheesy, a little bit meta, I guess, where the jump scare is them just hard cutting to a carnival ride that has a jump scare. So it's not even really the movie that's jump scaring you. It's a carnival ride in the movie that's jump scaring you, which I don't know. It's maybe a NLP hypnosis technique.
Yeah, kind of like they were like, oh, we can get away with it because it's actually just a carnival ride. We do this at Disneyland. Go ride the original version of the Snow White ride. It'll terrify you, or watch a video of it. Tokyo still has it. Except I don't think the witch turns and screams at you quite as hard as it did in the original Disney World version.
And I think there's a few jump scares in the animated Disney movies that we've seen, although none of them are jumping immediately to the front of my mind. But I feel like there's been a few times when I wasn't expecting something to happen and they kind of flash it at you. But this one's full-blown carnival. They even have the little buzzer and everything.
And it stuck out to me because it's like 5 p.m. I'm watching the movie, and 10 a.m. I had been talking to people on Discord about the history of jump scares. So, I was like fully primed to clock that.
The other interesting part of this too, if you think about Disney just straight up leveraging, okay, we're going to be out in the middle of the woods. We don't have to really imply much more. Like that'll do its thing. And all these other aspects. Oh yeah, there's magic involved. Oh, there's secret societies involved. They just kind of like plant all these seeds without ever expanding on any of them. And they kind of do the exact same thing where it's like, well, we're at a carnival. Why not also go into the House of Mirrors? Because what's creepier and what else would make for a great movie trailer? I mean, I didn't go and look at all the movie trailers, but I have to assume that there were some that used the cuts of inside that House of Mirrors. Because when you see that, you're just like, oh yeah, this is a psychological horror movie. That pretty much is a key indicator.
Yeah, I really liked I really dug the Hall of Mirror cinematography. Actually, I thought they did a pretty good job with that because you see a lot of films with that. John Wick 2, it has your Hall of Mirror scene and stuff. I'm sitting here looking at when the Rendlesham Forest UFO sighting was, which was after this movie. I was just thinking about lights in the forest in the UK, but that was late December 1980, I guess, when those started. Okay.
Talking about that House of Mirrors, this once I want to mention these old Michael Sarion videos, specifically at Oracles and Origins, and a really good one that I might have brought up a couple times, but it's well worth. It's called the Sacred Use of the Subversive Use of Sacred Symbolism in the Media. Say that 5 times fast. But in this and some of the other series around that time that he put out, he makes a really good case that occultists in Hollywood, one of their telltale signs, like if you're not just going to go for the Masonic square and compass or like the number 237 or just putting some obvious sign out somewhere, that one of their calling cards to talk to each other are setting up these complicated scenes with multiple mirrors and impossible shots where you're hiding the camera, because it does a few different things. One is that you're literally playing with light, which is light work, which is sort of a magical practice in this kind of like Hollywood way. But A is that you're doing this light work. The other one is that in another meta sense, right, is that you are behind the camera, there's a camera there, but you're hiding the fact there's a camera there because it will help someone watching your footage also not realize there's a camera there and actually become absorbed into the moment. So you're sort of creating this new reality, and that the more mirrors and reflections that you can portray naturally without letting the camera be seen, it puts someone deeper and deeper into one of these trances, in that the movie is constructing this reality that you're fully sold on. One of the best examples I think Sarion brings up is it Contact or First Encounter? I think it might be Contact, where there's
Contact is Jodie Foster and the
I think it's Contact, and they've got this long scene where it follows her down a hallway into a bathroom, and the camera goes over her shoulder, and you can see her in the mirror but the camera's not there. That was seen as like one of these technological, like huge advancements in cinematography, and that's kind of another reason why these creepy hall of mirror scenes are maybe favored by occultist filmmakers, is because it's one of their calling cards where they can flex their muscles to each other and being like, look how I construct reality. Look at the control that I've got over perception.
Yeah, although if I'm a cinematographer, I'm just like, hey, look how good I am. To a certain extent too. I mean, there's definitely a skill level there. So,
because you weren't initiated into the.
Okay, so the producer says do the mirrors, and as a cinematographer, I'm like, yes, that's awesome.
If you don't get teleported into a realm of terrifying cybernetic Mothmen.
Yeah. Just to reread that original the original ending that did not get completely filmed was not in Disney World, but Karen is trapped in a pyramidal prism on the crippled spacecraft, which I think you can find some evidence of that scene. Like maybe they made some models or something, but I don't think it was fully put together with that sequence.
It would have been so cool if she gets teleported to another dimension, but like Vincent is there waiting for her. Right? Like she's on the cusp of this black hole.
Or if she just shows up and there's Maximilian standing on his hell mountain. Maximilian and the actor Maximilian, yeah.
She's immediately in one of the circles of hell. The only other notes that I got here is that there are a number of cultures, ancient cultures, that did all sorts of rituals specifically on the solar eclipse, and they make a passing note in the movie where Jan kind of explains that solar eclipses are more unique than lunar eclipses, that lunar eclipses in different forms happen more often, and the solar eclipse is rare, so therefore it's like more magical, more special. Paraphrasing that a little bit. And ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, ancient Babylonians, ancient almost every people's all sort of agreed. And by the time that they figured out how to track solar eclipses, or at least that the sky was not eating the sun and it wasn't the end of the world, once they got over that initial reaction, the ancient Greeks, they saw the Greeks and the Romans, they saw solar eclipses as omens of the weather going bad, or that the gods were angry and something bad was about to happen. And one thing interesting is that in Babylon, they had, I guess it might have started in Babylon, but the Babylonians, when a solar eclipse was about to occur or as occurring, they would install a proxy king so that if anything bad did happen, it would happen to this like sort of stand-in king. And then after all the bad stuff was over, they would just, if he survived it, then they would just bring the new king back in.
Isn't that what Disney did for the pandemic? I mean, they literally did that, didn't they?
So I think that was an interesting observation. The other one, the craziest part to me in this movie is that there's no bad guy. I can't get over a horror movie that has no bad guy in it at all. Even if you want to bend over backwards, there's no bad guy. There's no villain in this entire movie.
I guess that's how you Disney-fy your horror movie.
I mean, like, sure. If you want to drop like $3 million in 1970s money, right?
5? No. It made 5. The budget was 7, I think. I've forgotten. I said it earlier in this podcast, so someone can rewind. Or I could just say a 9 budget, 5 box office. So not so people did not. Maybe they wanted a bad guy. They were on your boat.
And then the other one too is that we recently covered Finding Nemo, and I noted, I think accurately, that Finding Nemo is the first animated Disney movie that explicitly has an initiation ritual into a secret society. And since that's has the qualifier of animated, this is the first Disney live action movie I've ever seen that has direct references to murder, secret societies, initiation rituals, ceremonial magic, and a few other, I guess, sort of things. But I think this is one of the cool little metrics. Like, now my mind is always going to be searching for a Disney movie that's older than Watcher of the Woods, that also talks about secret societies and initiation rituals without me having to read into it. Like it's actually in the dialogue.
I was going to sit here and cite the No Mobile again, but I think that's what you're referring to.
Right. No, yeah, no, like them like explicitly stating what's going on. No Mobile, Bohemian Grove, absolutely, Redwood Forest. But you gotta know, right? You gotta have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. But in this one, they just put it all out there for you. They tell you, they even show you the initiation ritual where the girls got the blindfold on. Like this is basically an entered apprentice Freemasonic style ritual, maybe Golden Dawn ritual.
Yeah, I guess a few years later, this would be part of Satanic Panic. They'd be like, kids are going to watch this movie, then try it themselves, you know? Because I guess there's enough there you could try it yourself.
Well, and that's another. I won't go on this tangent right now, but I've got pretty conclusive evidence that I'll be putting out in a Satanic Panic comic.com, satanicpanicgame.com. I'm working on a book that kind of touches on this, but the Satanic Panic of the late 70s and 80s was not a new thing. It wasn't even hyped up from the previous decades. That there has always been a Satanic Panic in the States, even before there were the States. Salem all the way on. There was never more than a 5 to 10 year period in which some portion of the country was absolutely losing their mind over perceived Satanism or demonic possession or something. So that the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, I think at that point, it was like a boiling point where it became so ubiquitous that now we're going to make cartoons about it, and now we're going to have sheriffs talk to parents about it. But there really wasn't like a buildup. Like it had always kind of been there. And if anything, it was more pronounced in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, but people just weren't losing their minds as much as they were in the 80s and 90s.
Well, having just covered The Omen, some things we found in that movie was that is basically the pop culture point where 666 becomes the mark of the beast. I mean, obviously it was before, but that's where like everybody knows it because someone has to explain it to Gregory Peck. Like he doesn't know, you know. That's the point where Damien becomes something you probably don't want to name your kid. And that's the point where the Antichrist actually becomes simply the son of Satan. As opposed
this is 1976,
that's right.
First Omen movie.
And then they quote Revelation, but they make up the quote. It's not actually in Revelation, which says, when the Jews return to Zion and a comet rips the sky and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother till man exists no more. Which one sounds more like Nostradamus? And yeah, they wrote it for the movie.
Man, there's a folk song called 666. I can't remember.
Well, there's the Aphrodite's Child album from like 1970.
And that predates the Omen, right?
Yes. I was going to do that thing where I had it within arm's reach because I was actually playing it in the car a few weeks ago.
That's a creepy song. He's like doing it all falsetto. It's like a sweet sounding folk song, except it's all about basically invoking Satan and saying 666 over and over again.
But that wasn't a smash. Vangelis had more success scoring movies than with that band.
Fair point.
But yeah, apparently the Omen is just where everyone now knows 666 is the number of the beast. And before that, it wasn't just like everybody. It's like you and I talking about weird stuff on the Occult Disney podcast, right? It's not like everyone like talks about
that initiation ritual. 100% to me seemed like a Golden Dawn Freemasonic sort of thing. And now if you're gonna put that into the context of the United Kingdom and the time periods in which they said this was all happening, this was basically at the tail end of Aleister Crowley being alive, right? And Aleister Crowley would probably be the one that I would argue the main influence in even uttering the number 666 in music or movies and having it become part of pop culture. That before that, it was very much an arcane sort of occulted thing, and he made it cool with the kids.
Oh, you could. I mean, there's a very convincing narrative where Crowley opens up, you know, the modern era of pop culture, right? That's not necessarily for good or for bad, although it's kind of, I don't know, you can work it out how you want. It's just what he did kind of worked, I guess, is the, you know, whether he should have been doing that or not.
So if we had to put like one of those big like mind map kind of charts together where you put like ideas close to each other and it kind of branches out. If we did one of those for Disney and we decided what movies has Disney released that were the most directly influenced by Aleister Crowley, Watcher in the Woods is very, very close to the Disney bubble. And I would say so is one we're not going to get to. I did the math. I don't think we're going to get to it for like 3 or 4 years. Like there's so many movies to get through.
Wish is that?
Wish is the other one that like Wish and Watcher in the Woods are the two most Crowleyan Disney movies that have been produced that I've seen so far. There's probably some others that I haven't seen or I haven't noticed, but those two are like Aleister Crowley might as well have been summoned to help write the script on both of those.
Well, hey, listeners, message us if you want us to do Wish, because I remember when it was coming out last year, I did kind of think, oh, maybe we should do the new one about stars, and then it was kind of a flop, and I think schedules were wonky. It didn't happen, but
it's perfect for Occult Disney. Wish is exactly what the show is kind of about. But I don't know. It'll be fun to just tease it for the next 3 years.
It's also fun to work through the sequence. That's why I'm kind of saying, tell us if you think we should skip ahead. We're going to be obsessed and weird and do it the way we're doing it otherwise. Because someone beamed in and they were like, oh, Moana. It's like, yes, of course I want to do Moana. It's just, that's in the future.
I looked that one up. That one is something like 8 months away at best if we keep up a pretty decent pace.
Yeah. So, but like, I don't feel like I want to fast track them. We're looking very forward to watching again. Also, that's one I've seen a lot. I because my daughter I think that was the last Disney movie my daughter obsessively watched before she kind of aged out. So,
well, I mean, and since we're on the topic, if anyone's actually interested, so like I think we've kind of recapped most of our observations on Watcher of the Woods. I think we're winding down a little bit here.
Yeah.
But the list that we've got going on, once we get out of Dark Disney, which we've still got, I think 2 more movies that we're going to do in Dark Disney, then we're going to go back to regular old Disney. We're out of Ghibli bits, right? We're no longer doing.
We will have some in the future, but it's going to be a while.
So we just did Incredibles before we started this. We've got Pooh's Heffalump movie, which I think we'll do, and then Valiant, Chicken Little, The Wild, Cars, Meet the Robinsons, Ratatouille, Enchanted, Wall-E, Bolt, Up, Ponyo, Christmas Carol, Princess and the Frog, Toy Story 3, Tales from Earthsea, Tangled, Romeo and Juliet, Mars Needs Moms, Cars 2, Winnie the Pooh, Secret World of Arrietty, Brave, Frankenweenie, Wreck-It Ralph. Also, like it keeps going on and on and on and on. So there's so many movies. That was like 1/5 of the regs to the list that I've got on here. So we've got lots of content to tear up. And I also wanted to throw this out. I would love to do some like anime breakdowns. You're the perfect person. I know you also have like 20 other podcasts you do. But maybe we could just pick like your top 3 anime movies that I definitely haven't seen and recap those at some point. I don't know what seasonal shoehorn we can use so it's not Dark Disney or anything, but
I can find a good excuse. Don't worry about it. Well, like you said, I guess we are winding this one down, and we're technically doing shop talk, which I don't know. Some people maybe like to hear, some don't. We'll see. But
well, if you want to know when we get to Moana, well, Moana was like another 30 movies after the list where I stopped.
Yes. But winding down today, you mentioned your Satanic Panic comics. You got the conspiracy cards. Is that still the running game at the moment?
The running game. The next big one is going to be IlluminatiComic.com. That one covers a little bit of that Satanic Panic stuff. Like, it's a topic that I've been fascinated with since I myself was growing up in the 80s. Because again, I remember police coming into elementary school and telling people about beware, set up these secret passwords and code words with your parents so that if an evil Satanist tries to say, come with me, your parents have been in a horrible accident, come with me, then they would have to give you a secret password that only you and they would know. And that was explicitly to make sure you didn't get kidnapped because of this whole Satanic Panic. Everyone's trying to kidnap you kind of thing. So I grew up in that whole thing. So I've never been able to shake. I remember seeing the McMartin preschool trial as a kid and what freaking daycare are they going to? They get underground tunnels and goats. Like, I just get carrots and ants on a log and celery and stuff. That sounds way cooler, except for all the touching parts. But that kind of like set my mind on this. So I've been studying this for my entire life. And I think I've got a really cohesive understanding of it that's completely different than most of the mainstream ideas. I don't completely debunk it. Almost all the modern takes just straight up debunk Satanic Panic. It's like, oh, it was a product of its time, stereotype, nothing to see here. There were no satanic cults. There was no organized satanic criminal organizations. I think that's BS. I think all that actually did exist, but there also was a level of panic where McGruff was like, take out a bite of crime and look out for those satanic pedophiles and vans. Like, it was a weird time for both of those things to exist, right? But I've been working towards this, and the Illuminati comic touches on part of it. The Satanic Panic comic is going to touch on it. The Satanic Panic game.com is going to build. In fact, when we talked about the cat people and the seventh victim, the Satanic Panic game.com is entirely about that. It's about that guy that goes to the Satanic Coven and interviews them to see what's really going on. And I built an entire game around that. So I don't know, there's 3 or 4 different things that you can look into. Buy them all.
Okay, I'm going to plug 2 things. One is for me and one is for McGruff. Have you ever heard of McGruff's album, Smart Kids?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Everyone should go listen to Smart Kids. Just get the song. I know the song titles. Here we go. Full playlist. Skip the first one. It's that McGruff song that everyone knows and doesn't like much. But then it just goes into songs called Marijuana, Inhalants, Cocaine and Crack, Alcohol. And they're all based to like Steely Dan jams and stuff, which is kind of awesome. So,
oh, you know what? You are absolutely reminding me now, because I remember trying to find those on vinyls to like cut into other songs, and
YouTube has them for you.
Well, those damn Steely Dan backing tracks kind of ruined that. But now the technology has advanced so far to extract an acapella that this might now be possible again, to take the original McGruff talking about crack, cocaine, and inhalants and turning it into some AI songs. So maybe I'll work on that when I got free time.
There we go. And then you'll be plugging that sometime. As for music I make, I just released a collection at rovingsagemedia.bandcamp.com. It's my 6th collection of binaural things. Journey to Where, featuring 25-minute tracks with names like The Peppermint Ashram, A Dive into Medicine Lake, and Dreams of a Far Off Land. So again,
I actually saw you post that recently. I put The Peppermint Ashram on, and after about 3 or 4 minutes, I was starting to nod off. I couldn't see myself in reflections anymore, and I was talking to dead children with blindfolds on.
There we go. There's a plug. Okay, listen to it. Let me brainwash you.
Look, you're going to have to move fast. Conspiracy cards from Paranoid American are here.
Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip 1, flip 2, get a few of these packs. Flip it up, what's next? Move fake, we flex. Bigfoot in the woods, stay lying, that's facts. MK Ultra, no cap. Every yacht 51 is a trap. Roswell crash, what's that? They hide the truth, where's that? Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip 1, flip 2, get a few of these packs.
That's right, Conspiracy Cards from Paranoid American. A set of over 200 cards featuring legendary conspiracy theorists, cult leaders, esoteric secrets, and more. For more details, visit conspiracycards.com today.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.